I stood in the Grand Duke's throne room, wearing silk the colour of winter storms, while my family knelt in chains before me. They didn't recognise me at first. Why would they? The last time they saw me, I was bleeding into the snow, my fingers turning blue as I clawed at the carriage door while they rode away. My sister Victoria had looked back once, just once, through the frosted window, her face blank as porcelain, before she turned away and let the curtain fall. That was 3 years ago. I was 15 and they left me to die. "Your Grace," the guard announced, "the Ashford family, as requested." My father's head snapped up. His eyes, those cold, grey eyes I once desperately sought approval from, widened in recognition, then disbelief, then something that might have been fear. "Emily," Mother's voice cracked. "But you were." "Dead?" I finished, my voice steady. "Yes, I imagine that's what you told everyone. Let me take you back to the beginning, to when I was still foolish enough to believe blood meant loyalty. I was born the eldest daughter of the Ashford family, minor nobility with just enough status to be invited to court, but never enough to matter. My father gambled more than he governed, and my mother cared only for appearances. Still, I worked hard. I studied late into the night, learned 4 languages, memorized trade routes and political alliances. I thought if I became valuable enough, indispensable enough, they might finally look at me with something other than disappointment. Then, Victoria was born when I was 7, and everything changed. She was beautiful. Everyone said so. Blonde curls where I had straight brown hair. Blue eyes like summer skies where mine were merely hazel. Delicate and small where I was tall and awkward. She cried prettily, laughed like bells, and learned quickly that tears could move mountains, while my competence moved nothing. I didn't hate her at first. I tried to be a good sister. I helped her with her lessons, let her borrow my things, defended her when other children were cruel. But Victoria had a gift I didn't understand then. She knew exactly how to make herself the victim of any story. When she broke my music box, she cried until Mother comforted her for being so upset about the accident. When she copied my essays and I protested, Father scolded me for not being generous with my less talented sister. When she tore my dress before a ball, she apologised so sweetly that I looked churlish for being angry. By the time we were teenagers, the pattern was set. I was the difficult daughter, the one who complained, who wasn't grateful enough, who made poor Victoria feel inadequate. And I stopped fighting it because what was the point? I threw myself into studying instead, politics, economics, strategy. I corresponded with scholars, read every book in our library twice. I thought knowledge would be my escape, my value, my power. I thought if I couldn't be loved, I could at least be useful. Then came the winter of my 15th year, and I learned exactly how little I mattered. Victoria was 18 and desperately wanted to marry Lord Richard Blackwood, a wealthy earl with connections to the royal family. There was only one problem. Lord Blackwood had shown interest in me. Not because he loved me, I wasn't naive, but because I spoke 5 languages and understood trade negotiations, skills useful for a man with political ambitions. I didn't want him. I told my parents this clearly. I had other plans. I'd been accepted into the Royal Academy to study under the kingdom's finest political minds, a rare honour for a woman. It was everything I'd worked for. But Victoria wanted him. She wanted the title, the estate, the proximity to power, so she cried and pleaded and made herself sick with wanting. And my parents made their choice. "You'll refuse Lord Blackwood's courtship," Father informed me one evening. "I've already refused it," I said. "I told him I'm focused on my studies." "You'll refuse it publicly. At the winter solstice ball, you'll humiliate him enough that he looks elsewhere." I stared at him. That would destroy any reputation I have. The Academy acceptance could be revoked if I'm seen as scandalous. The Academy. Mother waved her hand dismissively. You don't need that. Victoria needs this marriage. She's more delicate than you. She needs security. And I don't. You're capable, Father said as if it were a curse. You'll manage. You always do. I refused. It was the first time I'd truly refused them anything that mattered. I said no. I would not sabotage my own future for Victoria's social climbing. I would not destroy the one thing I'd built for myself. They made their decision the night of the winter solstice ball. I should have seen it coming. Victoria had been too sweet that day, too helpful as she offered to fix my hair, to help me dress. The gown she gave me was beautiful, midnight blue velvet that should have been perfect for the occasion. I didn't realise it was 2 sizes too large until I was standing in the ballroom and it began to slip. The alterations she'd promised to make had never happened. The dress fell to my waist in front of 300 nobles, the royal family, and Lord Blackwood himself. The laughter was immediate and crushing, but worse than the laughter was my family's reaction. Mother looked away, embarrassed. Father's face hardened with disgust. And Victoria rushed to cover me with her shawl, tears streaming down her face, playing the devoted sister, trying to help her clumsy, foolish sibling. I tried to tell her the dress needed adjusting, she sobbed to anyone who would listen, but she insisted it was fine. Poor Emily, she never could accept help. I ran. What else could I do? I grabbed Victoria's cloak from the coat room, the only one within reach, and fled into the winter night. I made it perhaps half a mile before I realised the cold was too much. The temperature had dropped and snow fell thick and fast. I was still in my undergarments beneath the cloak, having torn away the treacherous dress. My feet, in delicate dancing slippers, were already numb. I saw our family carriage coming and felt such relief I nearly wept. They'd come for me. Despite everything, they'd come. I stepped into the road, waving my arms. The carriage slowed. I ran to it, reached for the door. It was locked. "Please," I called out, banging on the door. "I'm freezing. Please let me in." The curtain moved. Victoria's face appeared in the window, pale and beautiful and utterly empty of emotion. We looked at each other for a long moment. Then she let the curtain fall and knocked twice on the carriage roof. The carriage rolled forward. I chased it, screaming, pleading. "Father, Mother, please, Victoria." My fingers scrabbled at the door handle, my nails breaking. "Don't leave me. Please don't leave me." The carriage moved faster. My feet slipped on ice. I fell hard, my head cracking against the frozen ground. Warm blood trickled down my temple, steaming in the cold air. I watched the carriage disappear into the snow. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't work properly. The cold was inside me now, turning my thoughts slow and thick. This is how I die, I thought with strange clarity. 15 years old, abandoned by my own family, freezing to death in the snow because I wouldn't destroy myself to make my sister's life easier. I was angry. God, I was so angry. But more than anger, I felt something settle into my bones, something hard and cold and patient as winter itself. If I lived, somehow, impossibly, if I lived, I would never be powerless again. I would never beg. I would never need them. I closed my eyes as the snow covered me like a burial shroud. I woke to warmth and pain in that order. "She's alive," a voice said, male and surprised. "I didn't think she'd make it." My eyes cracked open to see dark wood beams, firelight dancing across the ceiling, and the blurred face of a man I didn't recognise. "Don't try to move," he said. "You have frostbite and a concussion. You're lucky His Grace found you when he did." His Grace. The words penetrated slowly. I turned my head, agony, and saw him standing by the window. Adrian Thorne, Grand Duke of Thornfield, commander of the Northern armies, the man they called the Ice Duke for his ruthless efficiency in war. He was perhaps 28, tall and broad-shouldered, with black hair and eyes the colour of steel. Rumours said he'd never smiled, never shown mercy, never lost a battle. They said he was a monster, wrapped in noble clothing. He was looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Why?" I managed to croak. "Why? Save me." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "I saw them leave you, your own family, abandoning you in the snow." His voice was cold, controlled. "I despise cowardice." "I'm nobody," I whispered. "I'm nothing." "You fought," he said simply. "You chased that carriage until you couldn't stand, and even then you didn't give up until unconsciousness took you. That's not nothing." He moved closer, and I saw his eyes more clearly. Not cruel, I realised, but carefully blank, as if he'd learned long ago not to let anything show. "The physician says you'll recover, but you'll lose 3 toes to frostbite. I'm sorry." He said it like it mattered, like my pain mattered. "You'll stay here until you heal. After that, if you wish, I can arrange passage to wherever you want to go." "I have nowhere to go," I said, and felt the truth of it settle over me. The academy wouldn't take me now, not after that scandal. My family had made their choice. I was alone. "Then stay," Adrian said. "My estate is large. I could use someone educated, someone who understands politics and trade." He paused. "I saw your family's library bills. I know what you've been studying. That intelligence shouldn't go to waste." It wasn't pity in his voice. It was something else, recognition, perhaps. As if he saw something in me that I'd forgotten to see in myself. "Why?" I asked again. "Because," he said, turning back to the window, "I was once left for dead by people who should have protected me. Someone gave me a chance to rise again. Consider this the same courtesy." That was how I died as Emily Ashford and was reborn as something else entirely. They thought I was dead. That's what I learned in the weeks that followed. My family had returned to the ball, claiming I'd taken ill and gone home. The next morning, they reported me missing, likely succumbed to the cold after running off in emotional distress. They held a small memorial service. Victoria wore black beautifully and cried at all the right moments. Lord Blackwood comforted her. Within 2 months, they were engaged. I learned this through Adrian's network of informants, extensive and frighteningly thorough. He brought me the reports himself, watching my face as I read them. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I looked at the papers, at Victoria's engagement announcement, at the interviews where my parents spoke sorrowfully about their troubled daughter, who never quite fit in and always struggled with her emotions. They were rewriting history, making my death a tragedy of my own making rather than their abandonment. What did I want? Revenge was the obvious answer. I wanted to rage, to expose them, to make them hurt the way they'd hurt me. But as I sat there in Adrian's study, my healing feet propped on cushions, I realised something. Rage was what they'd expect. Emotional outbursts were what they'd always used against me, painting me as unstable, while Victoria remained composed and sympathetic. No, I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. "I want to learn," I said finally. "Everything you can teach me. Politics, strategy, how to build real power. And I want to do it quietly, where they can't see me growing stronger." Adrian's lips quirked. Not quite a smile, but close. "That," he said, "I can do." For 3 years, I became someone else. Adrian kept his word. He gave me teachers, not just in academics, but in statecraft, in reading people, in understanding how power actually worked. His estate became my academy, better than the Royal Academy could ever have been. I learned that Adrian's reputation as cold and ruthless came from his competence, not Dos' cruelty. He made hard decisions quickly and lived with the consequences. He didn't manipulate or scheme. He simply acted with such decisive efficiency that he seemed inhuman. But I saw the truth. He fed the villagers on his lands during harsh winters, personally oversaw the schools he'd built, and remembered the names of every soldier who died under his command. He wasn't cold. He'd simply learned, as I was learning, that emotional displays were often a weakness people would exploit. I studied under his steward and learned how to manage vast holdings. I sat in on his meetings with merchants and learned negotiation. I corresponded with his allies across the kingdom and learned the intricate web of politics and power. I trained with his guards and learned to defend myself, not just physically, but how to spot danger, how to read a room, how to know when to speak and when silence was more powerful. I also learned about Adrian himself, though he never spoke of it directly. Through servants' gossip and careful observation, I pieced together his story. He'd been the third son of the previous Grand Duke, unexpected to inherit anything. His older brothers had tried to kill him when he was 16, seeing him as a threat to their power-sharing arrangement. They'd staged an accident during a hunt, leaving him wounded in the forest. He'd survived. Not only survived, but thrived, eventually inheriting when both brothers died. One in battle, one of illness, and their father passed soon after. The brothers had underestimated him fatally. They'd thought him weak because he was studious and quiet. They learned too late that quiet didn't mean powerless. He'd saved me because he recognized himself in that moment. Someone discarded and underestimated. Someone left to die by those who should have protected them. We never spoke of it. But I understood, and he knew I understood, and that created something between us that wasn't quite friendship, but was perhaps stronger. Mutual respect forged in similar fires. During those 3 years, I changed. I grew taller, my body finally catching up to my awkward limbs, filling out into something graceful. I learned to dress not for beauty, but for power, rich colours, elegant lines, clothing that commanded attention without begging for it. I learned to style my hair in ways that framed my face rather than fighting its natural texture. I learned makeup that enhanced rather than disguised. But the biggest change was internal. I stopped hoping for love or approval. I stopped trying to prove my worth to anyone. I simply became worth something, became valuable, became powerful in my own right. I managed portions of Adrian's estates. I negotiated with merchants and nobles. I attended social functions as his ward. He'd made it official, adopting me legally into the Thorne family. At these events, I watched my family from afar. They never recognized me. Why would they? Dead girls don't attend parties. I watched Victoria's marriage to Lord Blackwood crumble before it even began. He was disappointed in her, I learned. She was beautiful, but empty, decorative, but useless. She couldn't hold a conversation about politics, couldn't manage a household, couldn't do anything but look pretty and spend money. The things that had made her valuable in my parents' eyes made her worthless as a political wife. I watched my father's gambling debts grow. Without my careful management, because yes, I'd been the one quietly keeping the estate finances afloat, the Ashford holdings began to fail. I watched it all, and I didn't lift a finger to help or hurt them. I simply let natural consequences unfold while I grew stronger. Then came the day I'd been waiting for, though I hadn't known I was waiting for it. The king announced a new position: Chief Trade Advisor to the Crown. It was a role of immense power, overseeing all economic treaties and trade relationships for the kingdom. Candidates had to pass a series of tests demonstrating economic knowledge, political acumen, and strategic thinking. "You should apply," Adrian said when I showed him the announcement. "Me?" I looked up from the paper. "I'm 19. They'll never take a woman my age seriously. They'll take competence seriously. Everything else is noise." He leaned back in his chair. "Besides, you've been managing trade negotiations for my duchy for 2 years. You've increased our revenue by 40% and established new trade routes that 3 previous stewards couldn't manage. If that's not qualified, nothing is. The Ashfords will be there, I said quietly. My father will certainly try for the position. He needs the salary. Their debts are crushing them. I know. Adrian's eyes met mine. Is that a reason to hide? Or a reason to show them exactly what they threw away? I applied that afternoon. The evaluation process took 3 months. Written examinations, oral presentations, mock negotiations, strategy simulations. Hundreds of candidates from across the kingdom competed. I used my legal name now, Emily Thorne, and wore my hair differently, dressed in the severe, elegant style I'd adopted. I was no longer the awkward girl in the too big dress. I was the Grand Duke's ward, educated and competent and utterly self-possessed. My father was among the candidates, as predicted. I saw him at the second evaluation, giving a presentation on tariff structures. He looked older, greyer, his hands shaking slightly as he read from his notes. He'd never been good at economics. That had always been my work, though he'd taken credit for it. He glanced at me once during his presentation, his eyes sliding past without recognition. I was nobody to him, just another competitor. I delivered my presentation on alternative trade routes that same day, speaking without notes for 40 minutes, answering every question the evaluators posed with precise, detailed responses. When I finished, the room was silent. Then the King's advisor began to clap. Steadily, candidate by candidate was eliminated. My father made it to the final round. Barely. His name still carried some weight, and he'd managed to hire someone to help with his written work. But in the practical negotiations, he floundered. He grew flustered, made poor decisions under pressure, couldn't think 3 moves ahead. In the final evaluation, 12 of us remained. We faced a simulation, a trade dispute with a neighbouring kingdom threatening to escalate into war. We had to negotiate a resolution. I was paired against my father. He still didn't recognise me. Even sitting across the table from him, even as I spoke, he saw only a young woman, someone beneath his notice despite my obvious competence. "This is foolish," he said midway through the negotiation, his frustration showing. "You're offering too much. You negotiate like a soft-hearted girl." "I negotiate for long-term stability rather than short-term victory," I replied calmly. "But please, continue with your approach. Let's see where aggression takes you." He blustered. He threatened. He pushed for terms that would have satisfied our kingdom's pride but destabilised the region. Classic, short-sighted male posturing disguised as strength. I waited. I listened. And then I offered a solution that gave both kingdoms what they actually needed, not what they said they wanted, but what they needed, while making both look strong to their people. It was elegant, balanced, and utterly practical. The evaluators called it a masterwork of diplomatic strategy. My father called it lucky and overly conciliatory. 3 days later, the announcement came. I stood in the palace throne room with the other finalists as the King's advisor read the results. The position of Chief Trade Advisor is awarded to Lady Emily Thorne, ward of Grand Duke Adrian Thorne, for demonstrating exceptional economic acumen, strategic brilliance, and diplomatic sophistication. The room erupted in applause. I stood still, letting it wash over me, feeling the weight of what I'd just achieved. At 19, I was one of the youngest and certainly the first woman to hold this position. I'd done it with my own skill, my own knowledge, my own relentless work. I'd done it without them. My father stood 3 people away, his face red with humiliation and rage. He'd lost to a girl young enough to be his daughter. The irony would have been delicious if he'd known the truth. But the real moment came later that evening, at the celebration ball the King held for the new appointment. I wore silver that night, the colour of winter moonlight on snow. Adrian escorted me. his presence a silent reminder that I had the backing of one of the kingdom's most powerful men. We entered the ballroom and conversations paused. People stared. I'd become someone worth staring at. Lord Blackwood approached first, Victoria on his arm. She looked beautiful as always, but there was a tightness around her eyes, a brittleness to her smile. Her marriage, I knew from reports, was loveless and cold. He found her decorative but tedious, and she found him demanding and difficult to please. "Lady Thorne," Blackwood said, bowing, "congratulations on your appointment. Quite impressive for one so young." "Thank you, Lord Blackwood." I smiled politely. His eyes lingered on me with interest he'd never shown before. "Have we met? You seem familiar somehow." "I don't believe so," I said smoothly. "Though I do know your wife, Lady Victoria. We have a history." Victoria's eyes narrowed, studying me more carefully now. I watched the moment recognition flickered. Not full recognition, but a sense that she'd seen me before, that something wasn't right. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice still sweet but cautious. "How do we know each other?" "We don't," I said, "not anymore. But please, congratulations on your marriage. I understand it's everything you wanted." The emphasis on wanted made her stiffen. Before she could respond, Adrian's hand touched my elbow lightly. Time to move on. We circulated through the room. I greeted nobles, accepted congratulations, discussed trade policy, with surprising animation from people who'd never have spoken to the old Emily. I was someone now. I mattered. Then I saw them, my parents standing near the refreshment table, looking out of place among the glittering crowd. Mother wore a dress that had been fashionable 5 years ago, carefully maintained but obviously old. Father's jacket was threadbare at the cuffs. They looked diminished, somehow smaller than I remembered. "Would you like to leave?" Adrian asked quietly. "No," I said. "I'd like to say hello." We approached them. Mother saw us first, her eyes widening at Adrian's presence. The Grand Duke was semi-legendary, rarely attending social functions, and his appearance was always significant. "Your Grace," Mother said, curtsying deeply. "What an honour." "Lord and Lady Ashford," Adrian said coolly. "Allow me to introduce my ward, Lady Emily Thorne, the new Chief Trade Advisor." They looked at me then, really looked, and I watched the recognition begin to dawn. It started with confusion, moved through disbelief and settled into horror. "Emily?" Father whispered. "Hello, Father." My voice was calm, steadied up. "Mother, it's been a long time, 3 years, I believe, since that winter night you left me to die in the snow." Mother's face went white. Father actually took a step back. "You're dead," Mother breathed. "You died. We mourned you." "You mourned the daughter you murdered," I corrected gently. "But as you can see, I survived. His Grace found me bleeding in the snow and gave me a choice, to die in the cold or to live and become something more. I chose to live. Emily, sweetheart." Mother reached for me. "Don't." The single word stopped her cold. "You lost the right to call me that when you drove past me in that carriage, when I begged, and you did nothing." "We thought you'd make it back to the estate," Father said, his voice weak even to his own ears. "We were angry about the scandal, but we never meant—" "You meant exactly what happened," I interrupted. "You meant to punish me for refusing to destroy myself for Victoria's benefit. You got what you wanted. Emily Ashford died that night." "Please," Mother said, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time, not Victoria's calculated ones. "We were wrong. We were so wrong. But you're our daughter. You're alive. We can—" "You can what?" I asked. "Be a family. You were never my family. Family doesn't require you to earn their love through usefulness. Family doesn't abandon you when you stop being convenient." Victoria had joined us now, standing behind our parents, her face pale. "Emily," she said softly, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I was young and foolish and jealous, and I let my jealousy— Your jealousy? I laughed, the sound surprising me. Victoria, you were never the problem. You were a child playing games, wanting pretty things. You couldn't help being what they made you. But you— I turned back to our parents. You knew better. You were supposed to protect me, both your daughters. Instead, you discarded one to spoil the other. What do you want from us? Father asked, and I heard the fear in his voice. He was thinking of my position now, my power, what I could do to the Ashford name. Nothing, I said, and meant it. I want absolutely nothing from you. No apology will undo that night. No explanation will make it hurt less. I'm not here for revenge or reconciliation. I'm here because I earned the right to be here, despite everything you did to stop me. Then why tell us? Victoria asked, her voice breaking. Why not just let us think you were dead? Because, I said, looking at each of them in turn, I wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand exactly what you lost. Not a difficult daughter, not a convenient scapegoat. You lost someone who could have helped you, who could have saved the estate, who could have lifted the family higher than it ever dreamed. I paused. But mostly, I wanted you to know that I don't need you. I never did. I just needed you out of my way so I could become who I was always meant to be. I turned away, Adrian falling into step beside me as we moved toward the exit. Emily, wait! Father called out. I didn't stop, didn't turn back. I'd said everything that needed saying. The next months brought predictable consequences, though I had nothing to do with them directly. Lord Blackwood, realising I was the competent sister he'd actually been interested in, began divorce proceedings against Victoria. Without my father's stolen intelligence to prop up his reputation, the gambling debts consumed the Ashford estate piece by piece. My family became a cautionary tale whispered in ballrooms. The nobles who'd abandoned their brilliant daughter for their beautiful one, losing everything in the process. I didn't help them. I didn't hurt them. I simply let reality play out. Victoria tried to call on me once, appearing at the Thorne estate in tears, begging for assistance. Adrian had her turned away at the door before I even knew she'd come. If you want to see her, I'll allow it, he said when he told me. No, I said. She made her choices. Now she lives with them. You're not even curious what she wanted. She wanted me to fix things. That's what I always did. Fixed things, solved problems, made everything work while they took credit. I shook my head. I'm done being useful to people who only value me in crisis. Adrian nodded, unsurprised. You've grown cold. No, I corrected. I've grown clear. There's a difference. My work as chief trade advisor consumed me in the best way. I negotiated treaties, established new trade routes, resolved disputes that had festered for years. I was good at it. Better than good. Within my first year, I'd increased the kingdom's trade revenue by 30% and established relationships with kingdoms that had been hostile for generations. The king himself praised my work. Other nobles sought my advice. I was invited to every important function, not as decoration, but as someone whose opinion mattered. I built something real, something that couldn't be taken away because it wasn't based on family, or beauty, or playing games. It was based on competence, on my own mind and my own work. Adrian watched me with something that might have been pride. You've exceeded even my expectations, he said one evening as we reviewed treaty documents in his study. I'm exceeding my own expectations, I admitted. Sometimes I wonder who I would have been if they hadn't left me in the snow. If the academy had happened, if I'd stayed Emily Ashford. Smaller, Adrian said simply. Constrained, constantly trying to prove your worth to people who would never see it. This, he gestured to the papers spread between us. This is who you always were. You just needed to be freed to become it. Is that What you tell yourself? I asked. About your brothers trying to kill you? He smiled, rare and genuine. Every day, they thought they were ending me. They set me free instead. We worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Adrian said, "There's a ball next month, the King's anniversary celebration. You'll need to attend." "Of course. I'd like you to attend as my guest, not as my ward, as my companion." I looked up surprised. Over 3 years, our relationship had remained carefully professional, almost familial. He'd been my mentor, my protector, my teacher. But there was something in his voice now, something I'd never heard before. "Adrian?" "I know," he said quickly. "I know the difference in our ages, our positions. I know everything you've been through and that you need freedom, not another cage. But Emily," he met my eyes, "you've become the most remarkable woman I've ever known. And I find myself hoping that one day, when you're ready, you might consider more." I should have been shocked. Instead, I realised I'd been waiting for this, recognising in quiet moments that what had grown between us was deeper than mentorship or gratitude. "I'm not ready," I said honestly. "Not yet. I'm still figuring out who Emily Thorne is, what she wants beyond proving she's more than what the Ashfords thought." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm not asking for an answer. Just consider it. When you're ready. If you're ever ready." "I will," I promised. The King's anniversary ball was magnificent. The palace decorated in gold and white, hundreds of nobles dancing and laughing. I wore deep green silk that night, my hair swept up, emeralds at my throat, Adrian's gift given without expectation. I'd been there an hour, discussing trade tariffs, with a foreign ambassador, when the commotion started near the entrance. My family had not been invited, but Victoria had somehow gotten past the guards, appearing in the ballroom in a dress that had once been beautiful, but now showed signs of wear and desperate alteration. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, but her eyes were wild. "Emily!" she called out, her voice carrying across the room. "Sister!" The music stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned to watch. I felt Adrian tense beside me, ready to intervene, but I touched his arm lightly. "No," I said quietly. "Let her speak." Victoria pushed through the crowd toward me. Up close, I could see the desperation etched in every line of her face. This wasn't the calculating beauty who'd watched me bleed in the snow. This was someone broken, someone who'd finally realised that prettiness was an armour against consequence. "Please," she said when she reached me. "Please, Emily. I know you hate us. I know you have every right to hate us. But Father is dying. The debt collectors are taking everything. Mother is... she's not well. I don't know what to do. You're the only one who ever knew how to fix things." Around us, the crowd whispered. They were watching Emily Thorne, the powerful trade advisor, face her desperate sister, watching to see what I would do. "You want me to fix this?" I asked, my voice level. "Yes," Victoria sobbed. "Please, we're your family. Blood has to matter for something." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the sister who'd betrayed me, but a girl who'd been raised to value all the wrong things and was now paying the price. I saw my parents' failure, their short-sightedness, their cruelty reflected back at them through their golden child suffering, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction in her downfall, no desire to twist the knife, just a calm, clear certainty. "Blood," I said quietly, "matters when it flows with loyalty and love. When it flows into snow while your family drives away, it matters not at all. Emily, I'm not going to help you," I said, not cruelly, just factually. Not because I'm cruel or because I want revenge, but because every time I saved you, every time I fixed things, I enabled this. I enabled Father's gambling by managing the finances. I enabled your selfishness by always giving in. I enabled mother's obsession with appearances by being the disappointment that made you look perfect. I took a breath, choosing my next words carefully because they mattered. I'm not your solution, Victoria. I'm not the one who fixes your problems anymore. You need to learn what I learned in that snow, that the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. That real worth has to come from inside, from what you build and earn, not from what you take from others or how you look. I don't know how, she whispered. Then learn, I said simply, the way I did. But learn without me, because I'm done being useful to people who only remember I exist when they're desperate. I turned away. This time, no one called me back. Adrian and I left the ball early, riding in his carriage through the lamp-lit streets. We sat in silence for a long time before he spoke. That was harder than you made it look. Yes, I admitted. Part of me wanted to help her, not for her sake, but because that's what I was trained to do. Fix things, be useful. But you didn't. Because it wouldn't help. It would just reset the cycle. They'd be grateful for a month, maybe 2, and then it would go back to the way it was. Me doing everything, them taking credit, me being valued only for my utility. I looked out at the passing city. I'm more than that now. I can't go back to being less. You've never been less, Adrian said. You were always this. They just couldn't see it. No, I corrected. I became this. The girl who chased that carriage in the snow died there. I'm what grew from her ashes. Time passed. My father did die, his death hastened by drink and despair. I didn't attend the funeral. My mother went to live with distant relatives, a charity case after the estate sold to cover debts. Victoria married again, a merchant with no title but some wealth, and, from what I heard, she'd learned at least some lessons about managing a household and being a partner rather than an ornament. I hoped that was true, not for my sake, but for hers. Everyone deserved the chance to grow beyond their worst mistakes, to become something better. But that growth had to come from within. I couldn't do it for her. Meanwhile, my own life flourished. I negotiated the Peace of Thornfield, ending a trade war that had lasted 15 years. I established the Merchant Council, giving common traders a voice in policy for the first time. I wrote new trade laws that made the kingdom wealthier and more stable than it had been in generations. And slowly, carefully, I let Adrian in. It started small, allowing him to hold my hand as we walked through gardens, accepting his invitations to dinner that were just us, letting myself notice how he looked at me like I was something precious but never fragile. He never pushed, never demanded. He simply made space for me and waited to see if I'd fill it. On my 22nd birthday, 3 years to the day after he'd found me in the snow, I did. We stood in the same garden where I'd first walked after recovering from frostbite, the place where I'd taken my first steps toward becoming someone new. Snow fell lightly, beautiful now instead of terrifying. I'm ready, I told him, if the offer still stands. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile he only gave me. It stands. It will always stand. I'm not easy, I warned. I'm difficult and cold, and I don't always know how to be soft. I spent 3 years learning not to need anyone. I'm not asking you to need me, Adrian said. I'm asking if you want me. There's a difference. I kissed him then, in the snow, and it felt like coming home to a place I'd built myself, not the home I'd been given and found wanting, but one I'd chosen, earned, created. We married quietly 6 months later. No grand celebration, no hundreds of guests. Just a ceremony in the Thorne family chapel with a handful of people we actually trusted and cared for. I became Duchess of Thornfield while keeping my role as Chief Trade Advisor. Unprecedented, but then I'd made a career of being unprecedented. I wore silver and carried winter roses. Adrian wore black and looked at me like I'd hung the moon. I'd sent no invitations to my family. They learned about it from society papers like everyone else. Now, years later, I sit in my study, our study, Adrian calls it, reviewing trade agreements while my husband works on military logistics at the desk beside mine. We work well together, complementing each other's strengths, comfortable in our shared silence. Sometimes people ask if I regret how things happened, if I wish my family hadn't abandoned me, if I wish I'd been loved as Emily Ashford instead of forged as Emily Thorne. The answer is no. That girl who died in the snow was trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it freely. She was desperate to prove her worth to those who'd already decided she had none. She was talented and brilliant, yes, but she was also trapped, diminished, constantly apologising for taking up space. I am none of those things. I am powerful because I built power myself. I am valued because I made myself valuable. I am loved because someone saw me, really saw me, and chose me, not for my utility, but for who I am. My family didn't destroy me by leaving me in that snow. They freed me. They cut me loose from every chain of obligation and expectation and desperate need for approval. They showed me with perfect clarity that I couldn't rely on blood or history or family bonds. So I relied on myself instead, and I became more than I ever could have been under their roof. Was it worth the pain, the trauma, the frostbitten toes I still limp on slightly in cold weather, the nightmares I sometimes still have about snow and locked doors? I think of what I've built, the treaties that will outlast me, the reforms that will help thousands, the life I created through sheer will and intelligence, the man beside me who sees me as an equal and a partner. Yes, it was worth it. I didn't destroy my family. I didn't need to. They destroyed themselves through their own greed and short-sightedness. I simply refused to save them, refused to be small enough to fit back into the role they'd assigned me. My victory wasn't revenge. It was becoming someone they couldn't touch, couldn't diminish, couldn't use. It was building a life so full of purpose and power and genuine connection that their abandonment became the best thing that ever happened to me. They tried to leave me for dead in the snow. Instead, they gave birth to someone far more dangerous than the obedient daughter they'd wanted. A woman who knew exactly what she was worth and refused to accept anything less. I am Emily Thorne, Duchess of Thornfield, Chief Trade Advisor to the Crown and the architect of my own destiny. And I am untouchable.